Hello, where are we? Here. So I was just doing some multi-dimensional travel healing work. I identify as a little bit autistic, hence I have the ability to travel to different dimensions, more so than the average person. And I basically figured out a sort of 4D perspective, 3D perspective on a few things. So I wanted to share that. So the concept is that I think we have different states of awareness based on how evolved we are, and there's no judgment. Everyone's on their own journey. Now, two-dimensional concepts are based on two-dimensional thinking and thought processes, such as right and wrong, left and right, old and young, gay, straight. So these are two dimensional concepts, right? Which some people have elevated most of their thinking from a 2D state to a 3D state. So they are able to say, you know what, these 2D concepts aren't really working anymore. You know, there's no right and wrong, everything's subjective, for example. Or there is no young and old, we all have the same space of life. There's value at the front, you know, there's value at the end, there's value at the beginning. One is no better or worse than the last. That's another example of 2D. Now, a 3D concept. And then the whole 2D thinking, which is fundamentally behind I believe, the infrastructure of the current economic setup, which is based on the principles, as far as I'm aware, of Adam Smith, which is when we have things and we give one thing away, we have less. So the whole foundation of the economic system was built on that concept. However, that's a two-dimensional concept, because what we now see, or what some of us in 3 dimensions at least see, is that the universe doesn't work like that. The concept of the more we have, and if we have stuff and we give it away, we have less. That's not necessarily true, especially when it comes to, you know, things like passing it forward, or paying it forward, or karma, or, you know, the chaos theory or the butterfly effect. So I think when you're in that 3D space, I think that it's more in line with what Leonard Nimoy said, which is the more we share, the more we have. That's, I think, a better economic system, and that's why you see industries that thrive on sharing doing particularly well. So that's a 3D concept business or business model. So I think basically what happens is that let's just take these two-dimensional concepts and let's just put them on a different dimension. So let's say right and wrong is one block. Young and old is another block, right? Let's look at blocks. Well, I wrote it down. What else was there? Young and old, right and wrong, rich and poor. Rich and poor because wealth is subjective. Anyway, a few others. They're blocks, right? Now imagine that those blocks, okay, are on a different dimension. So they're now, let's look at them as maybe being a stage area, right? A massive stage area which goes off on, like, for eternity. And this is where everything is built. Everything on Earth in this concept is built on the same stage, same level, 2 levels, 2 dimensions. So everything that's built, so the systems and the corresponding business models and corporations are built on that second level. When you have a more awareness, which is cultivated through more love, then you go to 3D, where you start to see concepts such as, you know what, there is no such thing as gay or straight. You're basically many different things. Labels aren't really a great way to label things like that, because it's two-dimensional concept labels, us versus them. When you go to the third dimension, it's not us versus them. So it's not me versus you, it's we're all in this together. That's a three-dimensional concept, which is inherently built into that concept of the ripple theory, the chaos theory, right? When we do something, it trickles out exponentially. So that's a three-dimensional concept. So I do believe that in order to get from 2D to 3D, for the majority of people who are still in 2D, I think most of us are in 3D now, but there's still some people, it's not a constant state. We flip between dimensions based on our current energy levels and our perspectives and our beliefs. But most of us are hovering between 2D and 3D. Some of us are on 4D, 5D, some of us get glimpses of 6D. So in order to expedite the process of 2D to 3D, I think one has to focus more on emotions, because emotions are a three-dimensional concept. I believe, like, how do we feel? It goes beyond 2 dimensions, because there are a myriad of different ways in which people can feel, and how they interpret that can be expressed and interpreted differently. So three-dimensional concepts are very difficult to express in a two-dimensional sense, so we express it through feelings. That's why music is so important, especially in times when there's a shift. So the shift, I believe, based on my perspective and my belief, is that in the recent age of Aquarius, where the Earth's human resonance increased, these fearful energies, which were manifested through some of these fearful concepts and fearful business models, and business models focused on lack, which is essentially fearful, have now gone. Those vibrations are no longer operating, at least in my existence. When you move it up, then you start to operate more on a third dimensional level, which is more about, okay, well, we're all feeling the same thing. We're all really the same. It's not me versus you, it's us. So it's a third dimensional concept. Now, I do believe that there's a fourth dimension as well. So I'll just summarize what I believe the dimensions to be. So 2 dimension is what we are aware of with our 5 senses. Okay, 2 dimensions. 3 dimensions is what we're aware of with our 5 senses, plus imagination, perspective. Imagination, the thinking mind, right? A certain aspect of the thinking mind. It's not just seeing and taking in things like an animal does. We have the ability to think, which is a 3-dimensional concept. Now, unfortunately, because we're still using a lot of old 2-dimensional concepts to try and explain 3-dimensional things, which is why the education system is failing. Because if we try to encompass the idea that, okay, well, it's not just left versus right or me versus you, it's us, then the way we express that in 2-dimensional language is to then have a myriad or a selection of many different labels, which is what we see in many things. As we realize that we are all slightly different, our labels become more, because we're all labeling our own subjective experience, increasingly so on social media, in 2-dimensional concepts, which is listing, right? So you don't have, for example, like old or young anymore. We have age 1 to 100. That's a real basic concept. But what we're doing is we are then creating a myriad of different things. So for example, with 2-dimensional thinking, right? In the 2D world, there are like, how am I going to say it? Yeah, I've lost my train of thought. I'm still not quite down to earth yet. Anyway, now that's what I believe. what I'm trying to do is, from my perspective, which is a little bit higher because I have done a lot of work, inner work and outer work, in order to increase my love and increase my awareness. I've come up with a concept which is going to take people from the 3-dimensional to the 4-dimensional. So that's to encourage people who are already mostly in that 3D space of feeling, and we are all one, to 4 dimensions, which is where I believe we have access to things like the Akashic Records, the Tree of Knowledge from the Avatar, the concept that everything is available to us in some form, and we have access to that. I believe that's the 4th dimension. And I think that we get access to these 4th dimensional experiences through synchronicities. And then that gives us information which we can either use, which we either use consciously use or we subconsciously use, right? If we're talking about things like inspiration or signs or whatever else we perceive this fourth dimensional knowledge, which form it comes in, right? So that's my mission. Now I'm going to give you a 4th dimension, I think, answer to a 2-dimensional question which has 3-dimensional answers. This is the question. I've seen it repeated recently. Is the Earth round or flat? That's 2 dimensions. Round or flat, round or flat. Drop that, 3-dimensional people, move up and think, you know what? It's neither round nor flat. It's not perfectly round. It's got a dip in the middle. Is it spinning? Is it moving through space? These are all 2-dimensional concepts, in my opinion. So the third dimension, right, is so what am I saying? Here is a 4th dimensional concept. I believe, or no, a 3rd dimensional concept, possibly from a 4th dimensional perspective. So I don't think that the Earth is a shape. I think that shapes are a 2-dimensional construct that we've created to map our world at the time, and I don't think that some of those shapes are necessarily relevant. What shape is sadness? What shape is depression? So let's remove the concept of shape, and let's just say that it appears round in our 2-dimensional perspective based on what we can see, simply because our retinas and the camera lenses are round. So anything that goes beyond the peripheral bends into itself, right? Which is why there's a curve on the horizon. It's because we have a curvature of the eyesight, right? Similarly with cameras. Cameras can only capture a limited amount of space, and it's round. Everything outside of that peripheral turns back on itself, which is why we see the planets, I believe, as round dots. Okay, which is why mainly people think, okay, well, if these planets are round, maybe this is a planet, maybe the Earth's round, and other things. Anyway, before we argue that point, so this is what I believe. I believe that we're not living in a shape. We're living on a plane of existence, which is a vibration, which is essentially the way we think of it is in 3 dimensions, right? So I believe that if we take the concept of string theory, which is all the strings, right, all like a lattice, like a tapestry of energies in multiple directions. We take that concept and we change the perspective, and we say that concept is flattened. Okay, so we take the concept of a planet and we say that planet, right, is no longer round. It's in a string, but it's flattened. So it's infinite up, infinite left, infinite right, infinite down. The Earth continues infinitely. Yes, you may come back to this, you think you're coming back to the same spot, but you'll never come back to the same spot because the spot's changed. You've either changed direction or through time, it's changed. So this concept of it being round, we can drop that. It's never ending this way, it's never ending that way, it's never ending this way, and it's never ending that way, based on how we see it. That is a plane of existence, which then, if we look out, we see the moon, Mars, Jupiter, whatever it might be. These are planes of existence. So when you travel in a spaceship, right, you never actually get to Mars, to the moon. You never actually get to Jupiter because it's a plane of existence. It's not a physical space from one to another. You can't jump, you can't travel from one string to another. You can't do it. It doesn't work like that. People never get to the moon. People never get to the planets. The recording of it is reflected back in concepts which we think we know, which is light, speed, time, distance. But the facts are this ever increasing. The reason why we think that the universe is ever increasing is because we're just projecting. Oh man, I got lost again. Is it the stars? Why do we think the universe is expanding? That's it, because we're creating more stuff. That's it, we're creating more things. This two-dimensional concept of time, we're using it to map three-dimensional concepts, which go beyond time, right? In the sense that the more we think, we look into how far these planets are away, the more further they appear, the more further they are, right? So when we first glanced up at the planets, we were like, oh, okay, based on my caveman perspective, that looks like it might be, fuck it, 100 fields away. Or, based on my perspective, 1,000 fields away. And then as we learn more, or we map what we think we see in 2 dimensions, in 2-dimensional language, we could create time, which is linear. 3 dimensions is not linear, 3D world is not linear. And then we map it by ever increasing variations of it, because we're mapping the same thing and we're creating concepts, and the concepts are getting smaller. So this is why we've developed things like light years, because it's like, shit, okay, well, it's really, 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 really far. How do we know it's really, really, really far? Because we've never actually got there. We can just see it, or what we think we can see, in 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional lenses, what appears to be closer. But because it's a different plane of existence, we'll never get there. That's what I believe. So the way that we think about things like space, I think, is needs to be changed. Well, it doesn't need to be changed, but I think if we believe, which I believe, that it's actually a subjective projection, holographic projection, right? So that's why the theory that I just gave is my theory, and no one will agree with it because it's not coming from their perspective. I'm just using this as a platform to say that when you get from 2D to 3D to 4D, you see other options which are not usually available to when you're in 2D. Okay, and that was cool. I enjoyed that.